Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're all having a good day and maybe got a cup of coffee from the first session to this session. I'm drinking water. I know if I have caffeine this hour, I'll be up all night. But I appreciate really the opportunity to engage with all of you that have joined. I wanted to preface this remarks before sharing with our great guest panel. As you know, anytime a new administration comes in, they share their priorities. And, last fall, we learned that, the ACL leading priorities that's included in our website. Oh, my sound is low. Can you hear me better now? Okay. So last year,
David, I'm
ACL
sorry, it's not quite better yet.
Okay. Testing, 1, 2, 3.
That's much better.
I'll lean in a little bit more.
Thank you.
Okay. So last year, ACL priorities were shared, and they included caregiving, connecting people to services, whole person health, economic security, employment, protection rights, and preventing abuse. And so it's not just about the priorities that were interesting in what leadership shared. They did share how we work, like how do we implement the priorities. And they included a list for that. And that included scaling, marketing, outcomes, speed, and grant making. And so Sarah and I were reflecting of what session might be good to follow the AOD session. And we decided to hone in on scaling and speed. That was in part because earlier this year, leadership had asked, give us examples of scaling. And so we were able to work with many of you, and we were able to highlight across DD councils and USEDs, good work happening with partners in policymaking, project search, charting life course, and employment first, and examples that you will hear today. I think the key thing that I want you to know is when we talk about scaling, it's really about growth. And you're going to hear a lot of terms: scaling, scalability, replication, sustainability. At the end of the day, what leadership and what we have done within OIDD is kind of take a growth mindset. Where are we taking the federal dollar and making it grow and expand? So that's the key takeaway that I want you to take from today's call. How are we expanding our investment dollars? And of course, speed. It's about responding, being responsive to the needs, real time. We can plan, but sometimes we just got to take action with speed. And today's examples are going to highlight situations in which our grantees have responded with speed. So that's a little bit of context why we wanted to focus on these areas. So let's go to the next slide. So if I can talk about setting the stage a little bit about scaling. This is one of the 5 operational drivers. And scaling is expanding what works. Like what's working. And here's the thing I want to share. So often, grantees might fear to fail. And we want you to take risks. We want you to think outside the box. The commissioner very much endorses out-of-box thinking, but we want you to test your ideas. But those ideas that work, we want you to scale them, expand what works, but don't be fearful of failing, because that is not we want you to see. We want you to take risks. But through scaling, we move beyond pilot to bring proven evidence-based intervention to the national level. This means investing in approaches that deliver results across populations and geographies, helping older adults, people with disabilities, and caregivers benefit from solutions that have already shown measurable success. That was the charge given to us at the national level. And so today's webinar, you'll hear how the grantees are applying it. The guidance we got was scaling also being modernizing technical assistance and data infrastructure so that community-based organizations can expand their reach, strengthen sustainability, and align program with the evolving needs of the people they serve. And that guidance was very helpful for us because so often we get, a directive as this is the priority, but how to, it's shifts is critical. And we have found that guidance to be very helpful. Next slide. So it is through the role of scaling that basically answers the question, can this work for more people in more places over time? Again, it's that growth mindset of expanding the tent of an initiative. It focuses on replication and sustainability. In the DD context, as we've reflected on this is programs that can serve more individuals with disabilities across counties or states without losing quality. Next slide. So speed is the other operational driver, and it's responding to emerging needs. It is, a streamlined processes to ensure that services and research investments keep pace with evolving community needs. And whether responding to a public health emergency like COVID, addressing workforce shortages like the direct care workforce crisis, or meeting new demand for caregiver support, ACL commitment to speed means removing unnecessary barriers and deploying resources when and where they are needed most. And for me, at the end of the day, it's really being real-time responsiveness. It's really kind of being able to think short-term and long-term, but not losing sight of our short-term goals in which we operate with speed. Next slide. So similarly, as I said before, it's faster delivery of services for people who need them, respond to urgent needs, such as the direct care workforce crisis, and prevent solutions from becoming outdated before widespread adoption. And I've seen so much earlier in my career where you can research, but then by the time the research is done, the problem kind of went away or has been solved. And that's what, that's not a good thing. So next slide. So again, at the end of the day, it's really accountability for federal dollars. Federal investments must deliver clear, measurable outcomes and demonstrate meaningful impact, should be designed to maximize reach, stretching limited resources to serve people effectively. And as it relates to speed, rapid deployment reflects responsiveness to community needs and ensures support reaches beneficiaries when it matters most. And initiatives should generate actionable evidence and be structured for replication across states and communities where possible. And I think the examples you will see today are really some strong examples of where we've seen replication beyond our one state. Next slide. So last week, I actually was down in Florida for the Bridging Aging and Disability Conference. And I heard from guest speaker Serena Lowe, and as she was giving her remarks, I was really struck by the work that she's been doing with NACDD in terms of how they've been operationalizing scaling and speed with Bridging Aging and Disability Network. And I think this is going to be an area that's going to be increased focus. I'm not sure if this is the focus of the HCBS conference this fall or this August, but it's getting a lot of buzz out there. How do we bridge aging and disability network? And I want to acknowledge NACDD for being ahead of the curve, for kind of thinking strategically in this way for both scaling and speed. A good example that I heard during Serena's remarks were, cross-system service coordination. I was really struck by, and Becky talks about this a lot, our commissioner, people don't know where to go. They don't know where to turn to. And I was really struck by how in North Dakota and Illinois, they have developed what we call service navigation roadmaps. They survey stakeholders to identify the top challenges with aging adults with IDD and their families. And what they've done was they kind of looked at, okay, where are these key decision points? And I actually saw this beautiful model that they developed. And I feel like that's a really good example of scaling and speed to respond to a challenge that so many individuals with IDD and families are experiencing. Also, cross-training system training of case managers, as highlighted in Illinois and Michigan, in the Aging Network and Service Care Coordinators, in the IDD Network to improve the speed and efficiency of promoting cross-system referral and coordinating on services and resources. And what they've done is they developed co-joining intake form across the DD aging system. Again, an example of scaling and also speed. And finally, we've seen how there's increased emergency response with natural disasters, and how the councils from Alabama, Hawaii, and now Texas have been able to take this information and ensure that, maybe, working with the SILD and the aging network to get the information for the population. So I really want to commend the work done by the council, NACDD, for using this project of national significance grant to make a difference. So it does align with our priorities. So thank you. And with that, I think I will pass it on to Amy, who will work with our panel from the state. But hopefully this kind of gives you that 50,000-foot level explanation as to why we're honing in on this topic today. So thank you very much.
Thank you, David. We really appreciate you coming back to this session to give sort of the administration perspective on scaling and why it's so important for DD councils, especially in this moment. So thank you very much for coming and speaking. We appreciate it. So to kind of build off of that, his opening remarks and this foundation that he's laid, let's talk a little bit about scaling. We wanted to introduce a little bit of information about how you scale that is hopefully quite relevant to DD councils. And so we wanted to talk about 3 common scaling paths that councils frequently use. And know that there are other ways to scale, but these are just sort of the most common paths that DD councils are using. We're talking about today in this session, we're really talking about how councils can scale impact. Unlike typical nonprofits, councils operate in a systems change environment. So scaling isn't just about growing programs, although it is definitely about that, but it's also about growing influence. It could be about policy work, and it is definitely about your reach. So we're going to walk through these 3 common scaling paths and talk about how they specifically apply to DD councils. The first one that we'll talk about is growth. Growth is really about expanding what your council directly manages. So this could mean more staff, or it could be either more subgrantees or the same number of subgrantees, but perhaps they're funded at a higher level. It could mean that you expand your initiatives, so you have more initiatives. But it definitely means more direct oversight, which means that you're going to fund, your funding is invested towards growth of a program. For DD councils, this could look like a number of different things. It might look like expanding pilot programs. It could be increasing your advocacy staff, or directly running more initiatives statewide. What it often looks like is expanding an existing project in some way. That expansion could be geographic. So you could start an initiative or an activity in one area of your state, and then it's doing well, you're getting great outcomes. And so then you could expand it to perhaps other regions of your state, or maybe statewide. And that's one form of growth. Or you could grow by increasing the investment, thereby increasing the results or the outcomes. Growth really works best when quality and fidelity are critical. So in other words, when the project that you have started really needs to work the way that you put it together. That's when people need to stick to the original details. That's what we mean by fidelity. So growth is especially good for complex or really sensitive projects. But growth does come with some risks. DD councils really already operate in complex systems. When you expand internally, You could stretch staff capacity, and sometimes you can stretch staff capacity a little too far. You can also create some bottlenecks, which means that part of your project gets backed up and things start to slow down. And that slows the amount of scaling. If you have staff burnout and you have bottlenecks, so things are slowed down and backed up, then your scaling is going to be affected. And you're just going to not be able to scale as fast as you probably would like. So one question to ask yourself is, if we grew this program, would our team still be able to function effectively? Replication is the next common scaling path to talk about. This is really about enabling others, so partners, local organizations, or maybe some state entities to run your model. For DD councils, this could mean creating toolkits or training programs, or creating a policy framework that other people can adopt, other agencies can adopt. This replication really works well when your approach is very clear and structured and teachable. Quality assurance in a replication project is about making sure that you're implementing something the way it was intended, while still working within your local context. A council might consider training or instruction manuals on how to operate the program to help other people run your model. And there are, of course, risks here too with replication. The challenge with replication is really about consistency. Trying your original model in a different region might lead to different outcomes. Having a different partner to work on that original model could also change the outcomes. So those types of things can lead to inconsistent outcomes. When you make some changes, sometimes your outcomes don't go as planned. DD councils need to have strong technical assistance and monitoring systems in place to be able to maintain quality. When you're having someone else implement your model, you need to be able to offer a lot of strong technical assistance and some monitoring to really help them implement it the way that it was designed to try to get the best outcomes that you can. And then the third common scaling path is partnerships. Partnerships is the most natural fit for DD councils, and it supports sustainability and systems change. And one of the things, if you were at the last session, when Sarah was talking about PPRs, and she said one of the things that was very clear is that DD councils are the conveners. So a partnership path to scaling is right within DD council's wheelhouse. Instead of owning the program, you embed your work into existing systems. So that could be schools, it could be healthcare providers, it could be a state agency. Using partnership allows for a faster reach, and it leverages existing trust and infrastructure. This path really supports an approach that's made up of separate self-contained components that can be used together or could be selected and adapted based on need. So in other words, sort of mix and match pieces instead of one fixed all or nothing program. So it allows your partner agency to be able to say, this really works well for us in the context of what we do, and take that piece and really run with it, instead of saying, you have to use all of the pieces of our puzzle together. Here, with partnership, what you have to watch out for is partnership is really about shared control. So when you scale through partnerships, you gain reach, but you do give up some control over the timing and decisions and the priorities. So partnerships require influence without control. And you likely will have to depend on another agency's timelines and their priorities. And success in a partnership really depends on alignment and the relationships that you have, and also sometimes on your persistence. So let's talk a little bit about how you determine what scaling approach works best for you. A smart sequence for DD councils is looks like this. You might start with partnerships to help build reach and influence, and then move to replication once your approach is proven. So once you've shown that what you're doing works, then you might be able to build structure around it, like training modules and FAQs and things like that that would help you replicate that initiative. And then use growth selectively where direct control is really essential. Here's a simple path recommendation cheat sheet based on, your potential realities as a council. So if your council has strong internal capacity and you have funding available, growth can work. If you've developed a really strong model, but you lack internal capacity, then replication might be the most powerful scaling path for you. And if resources are tight and urgency is high, then partnerships are often the best path to use to scale your project. A common mistake is thinking that you have to choose just one approach. DD councils are really uniquely positioned to use all three approaches. You just might use them at different times or for different initiatives. So feel free to um, consider each one because each one might be appropriate at a different time. Um, Before we move to the practical applications, I just want to pause for a second and see if there are any questions about the material that we just went through. I know it's kind of fast. You'll have access to all of the slides. They're actually already posted on the website. But if anybody has any questions, I just wanted to pause for a second. Great. Okay, then we'll move on to hearing about some practical application. We are going to hear from four different councils. Georgia is going to talk about growing one of their projects. Tennessee is going to talk about replication. Texas is going to talk about a partnership that they have used. And then North Carolina is going to give us some information about an initiative that they have and sort of talk about where they are with it in terms of scaling, which we think serves as a good case study for people who are wanting to consider what to do with their current projects and how to scale those. So I'm going to hand it over to Harry and Rena from the Georgia Council and let them take it away.
Thank you very much, Amy. I want to take a moment too just to introduce Rena Harris. Rena serves as our Chief Programming Officer for the Georgia Council on Developmental Disabilities. A lot of the information I drew from her background with this project, so I have to give a lot of props there. So thank you, Rena, for your help with that. Rena does work directly with these programs and a lot of the history that behind this we shared together, and it was very enlightening. So thank you, Rena, for that.
Thanks,
Want
Harry.
to lead off right away with we have replication in action, self-advocacy in Georgia. Um, and I want to talk about the entities involved. First, we had a group called Uniting for Change and an organization called Shanghai Unity Network. Uniting for Change was a statewide grassroots self-advocacy network in Georgia, and Uniting for Change was the organization that we funded to support this group and the development of this group throughout the project. And I've provided the website for Uniting for Change because this quote comes directly from them, acknowledging Sangha Unity Network and the Georgia Council for their support in the beginning of this project and throughout the project. So next slide, please. So this project started as we saw an opportunity, starting with a strong history for something called People of First Georgia. And in that it was a long-standing project, and through that project, we've recognized some needs, the need for new voices, and a chance to build a statewide network. And so I know that there was a lot to the development of this, um, and we saw some additional needs. I think that I've covered all of that. Um, I know that there were some strong chapters in the beginning. Rena, did I cover everything there? Was there more to these chapters in the beginning?
So the original project called People First had a couple of strong local chapters. If you ever get a chance to Google People First of Fitzgerald, Georgia, they did some really amazing things. But that it sort of stayed very regional, and the people with disabilities were not really visible statewide. And as a result, they weren't being heard, and they weren't at the tables that they needed to be at. So we needed to rethink the project.
So that brings us to our next slide. So we recognized an opportunity, and by applying consistent support to move forward in the direction of growth, um, we capitalized on something that was already innate, that desire to grow and to change. And we also use this as an opportunity it was an opportunity for transition with the end of one project and then in a new project being conceived, brought to the table and borne out there. Next slide, please. So the opportunity in Georgia um, came from this transitional period. We had a transition of leadership and new ideas in self-advocacy. So, following the conclusion of that People First of Georgia project, we recognized that it was time to bring new voices and fresh ideas to the table in the self-advocacy space. People First Georgia was a long-running project. GCDD had an established board, and one of the functions of that board was to host a conference for self-advocates from People First chapters. And it was to draw from People First chapters around the state. And the purpose of those conferences were to build leadership skills and knowledge of relevant topics. And when it concluded in 2017, we recognized those needs, and we decided to take a look at the model and see where we could, change things and develop into just what we were talking about, a growth or a replication and growth model. Next slide, please. So we brought partners together. The intention was to build a statewide foundation, and we wanted to be based on a shared understanding of self-advocacy. So this is something that was present at the very beginning of the new wave of this project, where we started where Uniting for Change and Sangha Unity Network really took off. Um, Next slide, please. So I'm going to focus on the first 2 years. This project is still running in Georgia and is still growing. But where we see the replication process is really in these first 2 years of the project. So in 2018, uh, we changed the name of the project to Expanding Self-Advocacy in Georgia. So it's there. The growth intention is even in the name, the title of the project. And Sangha Unity Network was the recipient for the grant, and they helped lay the groundwork for a shared understanding and self-advocacy in this network building. Looking back at the beginning of this project, the intention was always to build more and more self-advocacy networks throughout Georgia, but we started with just a few, just those two strong chapters and hitting the ground running, getting information together. Um, Rena, I wanted to kick this one to you too on the uh, could you give us a little more information too on the bringing people with disabilities into the project?
Sure. Although it wasn't that long ago, 2018, the idea of people with disabilities leading projects was still a little bit novel, right? So that was one of the things that I think created the spark in Uniting for Change and really contributed to its success is the fact that people with disabilities led the project with support from allies. They chose the name, they created the mission, they planned its future, and still today it is led by a leadership team made up of people with disabilities.
And I mean, it's really refreshing to see these Uniting for Change advocates when we have events. I mean, it's amazing to see this, how it is all developed and played out. Um, you see there, we have this note that in 2019, Uniting for Change was established, but I want to tell a little more about that story in the next slide. This is a little bit of a shout out to our DD Suite folks, because this is an excerpt from a DD Suite report from the second year of this project. And you will notice that I see the hearts going up there. That's great. Um, so you'll notice in this excerpt, this is where we find that the name Uniting for Change was chosen by the self-advocates who were involved in the project. So a little bit of backstory behind this. The project had been running for 1 year in the planning stages. And this report comes from the very first period of the second year where they held their meeting. They planned to hold a meeting, then now they're holding a meeting where they're going to develop a training retreat. And in this meeting, the self-advocates chose Uniting for Change as their brand, as their name. After that, you can see through all the subsequent project reports that there are media blasts, there are outreach campaigns, there are surveys that all use the branding of Uniting for Change. This is where it started. So when it comes down to how do you put this in action, where do you see it how do you monitor this, how do you follow up on it as a council? We have it in their reporting. We're supporting this work, and it's an excellent way to see this growth come into action. Next slide, please. So, dialing back to the first year to see how this all came into effect. The original plan was to start and develop local networks, self-advocacy networks in 4 regions of the state. In the beginning plan, they identified a very general northeast, northwest, southeast, southwest regions within the state where they wanted to build self-advocacy networks. We really only had these two handful of strong networks at a time, or organizations at a time, groups, if you will. But we wanted to build more in each region. So we had a model from the previous project. So we focused on that strong model, and we knew that it could work because we knew we could train self-advocates um, in a space like a conference or a retreat. So we had those pieces. We just didn't have the individual groups throughout the state. Next slide, please. So we started small, um, and the growth you can see, again, a shout out to our DD Suite partners. We can see that in how we develop the scope of work within our platform. The scope of this grant evolved from year to year, adapting to ensure that self-advocates remained at the center of the work. So in the early years of the project, work focused on promoting and creating and sustaining an advocacy movement for individuals with developmental disabilities. So year one in their scope of work, we centered that work around defining self-advocacy, building leadership through data, and preparing for a year two training retreat. So this is sort of where it all comes together. We didn't have any of the networks built. We didn't have any of the individual groups, but we had ideas coalescing on, you know, uh, how we were going to move forward, how are we going to train people, and also we were gathering data from these areas of the state. Um, Going into the second year, we were preparing to actually apply the model. So in that second year, we led off with a planning meeting to develop a retreat scheduled for midway through the project. And the retreat was going to be based on outreach to these four areas of the state, bringing people to a central location for the retreat and training them on things that were important to them. All right, Rena, I just want to take a quick second, see if you wanted to add anything there to see if I covered everything sufficiently there.
We're good.
All right, next slide, please. So the example from year two, period 5, this is where we're all leading to. This is where the growth, this is ground zero where the growth started. Um, so activity A, again, our shout out to our DD Suite folks. The description in this activity was to facilitate and support the design of a statewide self-advocacy leadership network, with mission and vision for the Georgia Self-Advocacy Network. And Sun, the contractor, will ensure that leaders are equipped with tools and skills to share the mission and vision with each other on their local networks. The narrative on this report is they supported self-advocacy leadership to discuss uniting for change and its mission with participants at a retreat, shared details about Uniting for Change network with 185 people, with information on how to engage others. They increase self-advocates in leadership based on their interests. So this is the result of the first 2 years of planning, knowing that we wanted to replicate, knowing that we wanted to train individuals, and now we are ready to start building these individual networks statewide. Bearing in mind, council is not doing this direct work. We are supporting this work through our contractor. We gave them the design, we gave them the idea, now they're implementing the design. All right, next
Also,
slide, please. Oh, yes,
I'm
go ahead.
sorry, Harry, this was about the time where, and I think somebody had mentioned this in the earlier presentation, they were starting to get brand recognition. The project itself, Uniting for Change, was the name of the project. It's not the name of the organization that was implementing the project, obviously not our name as the Georgia DD Council, but its own thing. And so it started becoming a household uh, household name, and people were starting to recognize it. They had T-shirts, buttons, and they were showing up at the Capitol with us.
Yeah, that's and it is happening to this day. There are more and more of the self advocates from the organization. It's really, really wonderful. Next slide, please. So by year three, activities moved beyond just outreach and look in the multiple locations. In this year, we encourage repeated structure and activity and consistent engagement across sites. Um, This occurred as council staff regularly met with the grantee in their leadership circles to reflect on the progress and to identify opportunities for next steps. Something significant though, this is year three was COVID year. So there were some bumps in the road, but the Uniting for Change has some really wonderful graphics. Unfortunately we weren't able to bring them here, but they are on their they do have those that history outline, and it does show how this growth, even with the challenges of COVID, the growth took off. And in subsequent years of the grant, we have more and more individual groups in the different areas, and they're growing and they're building self advocates, and it's all just through support from the council. The council doesn't have to uh, we don't focus our direct energy on it. We follow up on it, but the grantee does it with our support, and it's just, I mean, watching the model take off. I mean, it's just we look back on it and we know how a successful growth model looks. So next slide, please. So originally we had northeast, northwest, southeast, southwest. We've expanded this to five groups now. So there is a central group in Georgia now. They use the same model. They use local leaders to implement these advocacy groups, and when we have events, they show up. It's amazing to see. Rena, did I cover everything? Do you anything to add on that one?
Well, they have a leadership collective. So they have the big statewide group that's led by the leadership collective. And then you have the five local area networks that have their own leaders as well that are part of the big leadership collective. So there's that ensures some consistency from group to group. Thanks, Harry.
And you all, this just it presents so many unique and wonderful opportunities. And I mean, it's a great, excellent example of how we can, so many different things can come together in one project. Council's role in all of this is to monitor and strengthen processes. We do this through our monthly check-ins, in our review of our reports, and we attend events, and in turn, Uniting for Change, their advocates support council initiatives. We have an advocacy day, yeah, advocacy days at the Capitol throughout the legislative session. It never fails. There's multiple Uniting for Change advocates there who show up. They register and they make their voice known. So our role is monitoring, and this is how it looks on our side. So next slide, please. So in supporting local network, we've expanded local advocacy groups. We've promoted best practices, and we've encouraged statewide adoption. So this is something that now we are drawing from more. Statewide. There's a way to kind of to coalesce these self advocates, and it's all due to the work that we support through the grant to Sun. Next slide, please. So why this worked? You can see in or what we have found by looking at the early movement in the project, it was the model was teachable, and through council follow-up, we could write a scope of work, give it to a grantee, and follow up on it, and they were able to implement it. And so. They were able to do this locally, and it's all made possible through this consistent support from council. I see those numbers for self-advocates every time we have to report in the PPR and see how we've grown those self-advocates by using specifically in this project. So that's where we see how this replication worked, increasing the number of self-advocates in all areas of the state. Next slide, please.
Harry, just want to add, and somebody had asked in the chat about the cost of the project. Things have gone so well over the last few years, and we've noticed that people with disabilities are being called on now more and more to speak in front of legislators or policymakers, and to participate at tables, right? Where everywhere that decisions are made about people with disabilities should be at those tables. So just now we're starting a little add-on to this project. Harry, is it okay if I talk about the
Yeah,
add-on for
go
a
for it.
moment?
It's great. I love it.
Um, the latest development was the establishment of a speakers network. So training people with disabilities to do public speaking, storytelling, and getting people ready to be able to talk in front of policymakers. This One of the more recent examples of where this came from is there was one of our advocacy days at the Capitol, and a person with a disability was set to speak at a press conference and didn't or couldn't show up. And so somebody thought, well, we'll just give another person their speech and they can make their speech. And I thought, well, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, because the person who's actually here, who said they would do it for us, um, or they would speak for Uniting for Change, has a different story, and in fact, an even more compelling story, because this person grew up in an institution. So we sat together and talked about what she wanted to get across, and we thought this is a wonderful opportunity to help this person and others to improve their public speaking skills, to tell their own stories on their terms. So the Speakers Network came from that. We wanted to avoid tokenization, as everybody wants to avoid. It's not it's not good enough just to have a person with a disability at the microphone, or um, in the work group or the task force. It should be somebody with interest and expertise in the topic. So just like we wouldn't want to be at a table of something, we didn't care about or knew nothing about, the same goes in this case. So it's forming and getting down in an organized fashion what people's interests are, what they're passionate about, and then teaching them and guiding them how to get that across to the people that really need to hear these messages, right? Because there are a lot of people that need to hear these messages. So now we've just taken this scaling and done an add-on to the project. Thank you.
Yes, I was you put that perfectly. So we've with our key lessons, we've actually got another one that we could report on later on down the line. So this is a lot of good work here going here. So just some key lessons that we brought from this is we started small. We started with existing resources. And then I mean, after recognizing the opportunity, we invested in follow-up. And we guided without controlling. So this is a grantee taking on the idea, and using it to build self-advocacy networks and build self-advocacy all throughout Georgia. And I think that is our last one. So in closing, I'd like to say that um, this expanded reach without more staff. So it's our grantee doing the work, and it builds local leadership, and it creates a statewide impact. And I did want to take just 1 second to answer a question in the chat. I noticed that someone asked, does the council provide support to members to attend advocacy days? Not directly. We do make sure that our days are accessible. We provide various supports like ASL support and any other needed supports. But these advocates show up on their on this is it's their idea. They register and they show up. So um, so I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Harry and Rena. We really appreciate it. We know that there are
Thank you.
questions in the chat. So if Harry and Rena want to answer those in the chat, feel free. Otherwise, at the end, we'll do Q&A and bring you back and get those questions answered, whichever works. We're now going to move to Lauren Piercy with the Tennessee Council.
Great. Hey, everyone. I'm going to talk about a totally different initiative, adult-sized changing tables in Tennessee. So next slide. I will skip who we are, but there are a few things that I think are really relevant to what I'll talk about with the approach to this project. And that is that we boil down when we explain who we are, we just boil it down to we connect citizens who experience disability to the government programs that affect their lives. Next slide. This becomes part of our core belief in how we do everything, which is people closest to the problems are also closest to the solution, but they're often furthest from the power and the resources. So we take that role really seriously, connecting those two sides. Next slide. So we tell our members that this is a feedback loop. We act on what you know our state needs, and our actions should address your life and your needs and your stories. So it's a big feedback loop. Next slide. That brings us to changing tables. Why did we work on changing tables? That was not something on my bingo card back in 2016. I was the public policy director, and really this timeline, I'll just fly through, but it was, I think actually it was either fall 2016 or early 2017. Oh, I have it on the slide. Our council member orientation ended, and one of the members walked straight up to me and said, I have a policy issue that I want to work on while I'm here. And I was so impressed because not everyone goes to orientation knowing that. And she told me about needing adult-sized changing tables, and it was not something that was in the national discussion. It was not something that any of our other council members had ever brought to us or that was really on our radar. We were deep in employment first and supported decision-making at that time. But in spring, just a few months later, she made that her mission at Disability Day on the Hill to raise awareness. And for the next several years, legislative advocacy was something that just snowballed. People heard her and realized they had the same need, or they knew someone with the same need, or they had a parent with the same need, and they never talked about it because they assumed they were the only ones. So legislators asked us to make this a household term. And that's what we did for several years. We had a major comm strategy. Our communications lead is in the meeting right now. She can answer questions in the chat if you have them. But essentially, we used a mix of media, meaning op-eds with storytelling and articles, videos. I will show you one in just a minute. And we even did billboards, and I'll show you that. We also really leveraged our grassroots advocacy. We brought all of these people together with their stories to build their own coalitions. And there is a very, I think, sophisticated and aggressive is not the word I want, but active Changing Spaces nonprofit network that we plugged people into because we didn't want to recreate the wheel. We wanted to plug people in the partnerships that Amy was talking about with the existing momentum. So fast forward to 2021, a bill was introduced in our state to increase access to adult-sized changing tables, and things were funded in 2022. So this happened in a relatively short period of time. I think by some standards, that's a long initiative, but I hope you all feel the same way I do, which that is lightning fast from start to finish. I wish every policy topic would be funded a few years after the initial conversation we have with a council member. So just a little bit about the bill process. We abandoned trying to do a mandate because it was clear that was not going to go anywhere. We would probably still be trying to push that boulder up the hill now if we had not. And we created a permissive grant program instead, basically opt-in instead of being forced to have changing tables. There's pros and cons. And then we got commitments from state agencies to install tables in all state parks, welcome centers, and rest areas by 2030. That's probably the biggest way that we scaled this project. And it's through that strategy that Amy talked about of partnerships. How can somebody else take the ball that we're handing them and run with it well after we've stopped and moved on to something else? Next slide. So this is a very short video that I want to share because it says so much in so little time, and I'm going to reference just how important our investment in this video was. Let me get this full screen in here. Oh, you know what? Let me share it. Let me stop and make sure I'm doing optimize for sound. Oh, I was. Sorry, everyone. I don't know why I can't find the play button. My screen is not showing me. Let's see if I hit. Oh boy. It's always when you're rushing that things don't. So sorry. My play button is not, my mouse cannot reach it. Maybe third time's a charm. Bear with me. Yeah.
Elena is always happy. She's almost always smiling. She loves going places, loves to be around people, and just be included in her community just like anyone else does. She is a huge blessing to our lives. Elena is completely nonverbal. She relies on us for all of her daily care, for changing her clothes, for toileting, for feeding. We have to comb her hair and brush her teeth. Good job. Do you want to go? Go. All right, let's go. Come on. For someone like Elena, having a location to change her, our only option at this point is to lay her in a dirty bathroom floor. That exposes her because you can see under the stalls. Once they outgrow the baby changing tables, that is our only option. So we spend a lot of time driving around parking lots, finding that area where we can turn the van away and where there aren't people passing by that can see her, because she is 18 years old and we do want to respect her privacy and keep her dignity and not expose her. I began speaking with our church, different ball fields and things where Elena would go, just letting them know that we had that need. But once I joined the council, things really started to change and take shape. After my orientation, I sat down with Lauren and I expressed the need for adult-sized changing tables, and it wasn't something that she didn't care about. It was just something that was not on her radar and that she had never thought about. And so she began walking me through the process of how do we work towards getting a bill introduced, how do we find a sponsor, and how does the process work?
We're designed so that our council members who are citizens and experience disability in their daily life outnumber the staff. So we are there guided by them. I'm the public policy director. I can help her navigate the legislative process. I can help get meetings with legislators and make introductions, and I can lend capacity when we have a dozen meetings we need to make before a committee meeting, for example. However, Chrissy is the expert She can answer the questions that I can't answer because I've not lived it like she has. Probably the most important thing the council does is we give a platform to people like Chrissy that she may not have felt that she had before.
There was a lot I didn't understand about policy and legislation, and I felt a little inadequate. I think I've gained more confidence in my story, in sharing our story, so that others can understand what our life is like, and honestly what the lives of other individuals and other families who have a loved one with a disability, what they might be going through.
It's intimidating to take that first step. One way to take the first step is to go to our website. We can connect you with people in your community who are ready to walk with you.
It just takes everyday people speaking up, sharing their stories to make change. And I didn't think I could do it. Along the way, so many times I have doubted myself, but just share your story, because no one lives your life.
All right. So that was one of our most impactful investments, that video. And then we did a billboard campaign, and you can see on this next slide what our billboards look like. And we strategically placed these on the route from Nashville to the communities that the finance chairs lived in. And I'm not kidding, that we only had enough money for a few billboards, and that's what we did. So they would have to see them every time they commuted to and from Nashville. Next slide. We also did an effective problem statement with a QR code to our videos and our webpage. And that was our legislative leave behind, so that whoever was taking the meeting could be as effective or not verbally. And there was a succinct statement and a solution written down. Next slide. We had lots of celebrations that we also lifted up, and people just got swept up in wanting to be part of this. Next slide. So just to wrap this up and talk about the scale and replicability, we now have over 200 tables installed across Tennessee. We started with 0. This is a household term now. In fact, everyone who comes into our Partners in Policymaking Institute, Disability Day on the Hill, any disability event, they know who Chrissy Hood is, and they know what adult size changing tables are. And that is not only because of the effective campaign, it's because we partnered with entities who are now continuing this work. It didn't go away. We are also regularly consulting with other states. ITAC told us that about 30% of councils nationwide are engaged in similar work. And project history, including the why and the how, live on our website. So when we do consult with someone, or if someone emails us and asks about the project, we can point them somewhere public facing that answers a lot of their questions. And I think that's really important, is to have sort of a replicability guide. Sure, you can meet, there's nothing that will replace meeting and really getting into the nitty-gritty and answering questions live. But if there's somewhere to point people to that continues to live on past your project, I think it really helps the replicability. And you can go to the next slide, Amy. So just so you can see, there's a nationwide map that Changing Spaces maintains. There's a lot of changing tables across the country. You can go to this map, and I can drop it in the chat, and zoom in on Tennessee and find any of our tables. And we've gotten emails from people that say, I can go from Michigan to Florida now because we can stop in Tennessee and use an adult size changing table. And it's really life-changing for people not only in Tennessee, but wanting to pass through Tennessee or come to tourist destinations in Tennessee. Dollywood, for example, has a table, and that's a big national. So is the Smoky Mountains. I could go on. The replicability guides look like this that are on our website. And they actually now live on the cabinet level Department of Disabilities website. They've taken things over. Thank you, Ashley. I see my colleague is putting links in the chat. Next slide. So yeah, our website anticipates detailed level questions. Next slide. Okay, I want to yield back time because I know we have 2 more speakers and our time is running short, but we'll be happy to watch the chat for Q&A. Thank you, Amy, for the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you so much, Lauren. What a great project, and so interesting the way that it just really blew up so fast and scaled so quickly. Now I'm going to turn it over to Beth Stalvey, and she is going to talk about scaling through partnerships.
Great. Hi, everyone. I am Beth Stalvey. I'm from Texas. I am trying to make sure that I can move the slides. Okay. I think it's working. Okay, so I'm going to talk about partnerships. If you have not been to Texas, welcome. I need to tell you just a little bit about Texas because it really does impact the way that we scale some of our projects, and our geography is really one of the challenges that we face in terms of our council projects. So as you know, Texas is the second largest state in the United States. We have 4 of the largest cities in the United States, Houston, Dallas, Austin, San Antonio. And even though we have some of those large cities, we also have huge areas that are rural, and we even have some areas that are designated frontier regions. We have 254 counties. And while we have council members that live throughout the state, they tend to be located in these urban areas and not so much in our rural areas. And then we, as a council, are smack dab in the middle of the state capitol, in the middle of the state, trying to reach all of these areas. It is a 12-hour drive to go from north to south of our state. And that poses some challenges in terms of us being able to share programs and create some of those partnerships. So we have a pretty tall order when we are looking for partnerships. We really want to find, just like I think all of my colleagues in other states, we want partners who have that community connection, who are very well known and respected in their communities, that they really understand the culture, the language, the exact lived experience in that community and in that part of the state. Ideally, it would be someone who has a long-term relationship in this community. They've not just been there for maybe one grant program or brand new for a couple of years. It's someone who is really embedded in that community culture. They are delivering programs that they can adapt as the needs of their community are changing. So they are continually doing needs assessments and building programs based on those changing needs. And then we would also like a partner who is not afraid of a little outcome measurement. So because we have tall orders for being able to collect data and measure our impact, we're really looking for partners that are willing to help us with surveys and do have some capacity for being able to document those results and be able to report them. So typically when we are looking at scaling and really trying to take certain programs and share them in other parts of our state, we tend to reach out to our state agency partners, specifically those who have a local and a community presence. And so ideally we're picking an agency who we work with here in Austin and we know well. They have local chapters and they are some great chapters. But as we know, sometimes those chapters, depending on the organization, may operate very independently. And so each chapter essentially is its own organization. They might have their own board, they might have their own champions. Each one is very different across the state, depending on the region that you're in. We have some very active chapters, as I'm sure you all do, and then we have some that are not very active and only have a couple of members. And so what happens is then we're reaching out to these local chapters, but it requires a lot of of individual contact. It requires a lot of individual partnership to see what chapter has what capacity to be able to contribute or to share an initiative or a program that we have been working on. And so, of course, this is a process that moves very slowly. It is very effective, but again, when we are talking about things that need to move quickly, this, in our experience, is not really a fast option. So we actually did find a match to our partnership post, if you will, in AgriLife. This is the AgriLife Extension. AgriLife Extension is housed with the Texas A&M University, which is our land grant university in our state. They are funded by federal sources like the Department of Agriculture, but they are also funded with other federal sources, some state funds, and also some local and county funds as well. This organization is very connected to communities, which was one of the reasons that we were interested in talking with them. They work on pretty broad issues like food security, health and wellness, disaster recovery, economic resilience, some pretty big issues, and some issues that we also had similar interest in. The real attractiveness of this partnership is that the AgriLife Extension has a presence in every Texas county. They have a staff of county agents, and they have a very robust network of volunteers. So there are actually county agents who can tell us what it's like to live in a frontier part of Texas. The other feature is that Texas A&M University is a state agency. And so again, from a procurement standpoint and from sharing resources and council funding, we get to do an interagency agreement. And so for those of you who are well-versed in procurement, you know that that is much faster and easier than a 9-month bid process. And then the other strength was that AgriLife shares an extension network, which is a national network very similar to DD Councils. And so not only can we draw on the resources of our national networks to help Texas, but we can also share some of our programs nationally as well. We are specifically working with the Department of Family and Community Health, and these extension agents are charged with specific missions to do outreach, to go find folks and talk to them where they live and where they work. They have a very large pillar of education and programming in each of their counties, and implementing programs that the A&M and AgriLife Extension have delivered to them. So in terms of this partnership, we find ourselves with a new scalability model that we have not had before. So in contrast to a chapter model, this is a partnership model where our DD Council connected and funded the positions of regional coordinators. So now instead of us just having the council in Austin, we have 5 people who are in South Texas, North Texas, East Texas, and can really be much closer to these communities so that things that are happening, or if there are certain needs in an area, Erin can go to a meeting in Dallas. She can make some connections with partners there, and then she can talk to us as a collaboration in terms of what's happening. People can share resources they have from around the state. And then we can actually work within the AgriLife infrastructure for all 254 counties and for all of the county agents to be able to share our work and to reach individuals with developmental disabilities. The co-branding of this partnership is really important to both of us because when the council is sharing information and resources or programs in certain counties, then when we are co-branded with AgriLife, that is a very well-known entity and is a trusted resource. And so when we are co-branded, they say, okay, these resources might actually have some credibility. And then similarly, when AgriLife is in a community and they would like to reach out specifically to individuals with disabilities, they can look at the brand of Texas Council for Developmental Disabilities disabilities and see some level of expertise in that area. So let me just give you two quick examples of how we have taken some of our initiatives and scaled them through this infrastructure. The one is through inclusive programming. So I mentioned that we started with family and community health, and so we wanted to start with some community health programs. We knew that people were delivering these programs, and a lot of them were in-person classes, nutrition classes, and things of that nature. And so when they were delivering these programs, we would ask folks, do you include people with disabilities? Let us tell you some basic principles about people first, accessibility to your programs, how you're sharing information about how that class works. And most of the agents said, this is, we really want to make our programs more accessible. Could you give us a checklist? And so one of the first projects was to create very simple accessibility checklist. I'm sure most councils actually have one on their website, but it was sharing that resource within this AgriLife system. That checklist ultimately led to agents saying, I have a gardening program and I would like to make that inclusive. And so we started expanding beyond the checklist to really what makes a program accessible. And that program was made available to schools and other places within a county. We also were able to partner in the local areas with summer camps, parks and recreation. And then we had a lot of employers, especially in the Dallas region, saying, hey, we would like your consultation on accessibility as well. Let's have some conversations. As a result, the team at AgriLife developed a curricula that was available for all county agents. They called it Aspire. And now that Aspire program is required for onboarding all new county agents that come into the AgriLife system so that everyone can come in, hopefully, with a baseline for inclusion. This program, the Aspire program, has trained about 1,100 employees so far, and we hope that the programming is more inclusive, people are more connected. We certainly see a lot more interest and involvement from the county agents, especially around the needs of their residents with disabilities. And we have seen a lot of really exciting outcomes around DD Awareness Month, where agents are approaching their mayors and getting city proclamations for DD Awareness Month for the first time. We've even had some county agents that are developing city internship programs to involve people with disabilities in some of their planning. And then the second and final example that I want to give you is related to food handler certificates. This is a certificate that if you are going to work in any establishment that handles food, our state says that you must have a certificate. I know this is not unique to Texas. There are many other places nationally that also require this. In our state, we have a 2-hour PowerPoint training that everyone must sit through before they can take their food handler certification. In my opinion, it is very boring to listen to 2 hours of the temperature of chicken. And at what point does that become dangerous to someone? So we have one of our regional coordinators, Rosa, who lives in South Texas, looked at that program and said, hey, I could probably adapt this for some people with developmental disabilities and probably get some more success with people learning this information. So it's the same information. She didn't change anything. It's still the state certification. People still sit for the same exam. But instead of watching slides about all of the safety gear that a person needs to wear in a restaurant, she's adapted it so that it's much more interactive, so someone can stand and have an apron on, but not a hairnet, and say, hey, what am I missing? So they turned it into a more interactive setting. People were very pleased to see this. They went through the training with ease and then started asking for more in these 18-plus programs. So Rosa shared it with the other regional coordinators around the state. They started providing providing some classes. Of course, as school districts and other 18+ programs in particular started hearing about this program, they're requesting trainings. So now the regional coordinators are training the county agents in those areas who have been getting requests for the training programs. And as it is expanding and as folks are requesting training, we are implementing the master trainer model so that this adapted training program can be delivered by more and more county agents. And so we are still in the process of getting more folks trained in this program to deliver school districts in particular, but we're definitely getting more interest from folks who are seeking employment as well. So initially, it has been the staff around the training that has been the biggest investment. It's only $20 to sit for the food handler certification exam. We trained 185 participants at the beginning of this project, and we are now expanding that in other areas to offer this training to others. The state vocational rehabilitation program has shown interest in this project, and so now they will be another entity that can report referrals. Again, because this is a state agency, they are now connected in making payments for these $20 certificates so that they can send more clients and be successful with this training. I will tell you just two stories. One story is one of my favorite from Rosa. When she first started doing this program, she had a participant who worked in a Chinese restaurant. Yes, there are a lot of Chinese restaurants in South Texas, but they worked in this Chinese restaurant, and but she only cleaned and did some other things around the restaurant. And she got her food handler's license. They promoted her. She got a raise, and now Rosa really enjoys seeing her in the drive-through line when she goes through. One of my other favorite stories is at a job fair where this adaptive training was offered in the morning. Individuals went through the training, they sat for their certification, and then in the afternoon after lunch walked over, showed their certificate, and got jobs. And so it is really great to see examples of this kind of scalability, this sustainability, and the systems change. We're hoping that this leads to other areas because this infrastructure does have medical training in the Texas A&M system. It also has some inclusive childcare centers. I just want to point out as kind of a last thought is that this really is just one network, and we are really pleased to be able to see how this partnership has developed. I think the comments earlier about how you can give ideas and let an existing infrastructure kind of take it and run with it. That's exactly what they have done. And then we have supported them along the way as they have been able to integrate this into their existing system. But I will remind us all that this is just one network. We are always looking for other partners and other infrastructures, and we are always looking for who's next.
Thank you so much, Beth, for giving all of that really great information. We really appreciate hearing about such a wonderful partnership that you've managed to really just use so effectively. And hopefully that's something that other states and territories can really model after. So thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
We do recognize that the session end time is about what time it is now. We do have another presenter, and so I'm hoping that you can stay on and listen to Melissa present as well about her wonderful project that they are looking to scale. Melissa?
Thank you, Amy, and I appreciate your in advance being willing to advance my slides. So as Amy said, I'm Melissa Swartz at the North Carolina Council on Developmental Disabilities. We're here today to talk about the Ability Leadership Program of North Carolina as it is related to the scalability path. Go ahead and go to the next slide. I'm really not going to go over all of those things again, but let's just say that all of the information that Amy and Cheryl and team gave in the area of replication, this particular initiative checks all of those boxes. And ultimately, in the end, we're really looking for information on how to expand this particular initiative. Will you go to the next slide, please, Amy? The Ability Leadership Program, or ALP or ALP initiative, provides statewide advocacy education and leadership development for advocates, families, and community stakeholders. Half or more program operations, the coordination, the management, and training personnel are individuals with disabilities, as are the trainees. In ALP, training participants are called leaders and trainers are called facilitators. This distinction was manifested by ALP self-advocates and participants as they participated in the development from the very beginning. Next slide. The ALP initiative addresses the North Carolina Council on Developmental Disabilities 5-year state plan goal for advocacy and development. The initiative itself addresses system gaps, including expense, post-graduation participant tracking, and relationship maintenance. ALP brings together and trains together people with IDD, parents, family, and other community stakeholders interested in supporting the IDD community. And ALP prioritizes individuals or people with intellectual and developmental disabilities as trainers, as program coordinators, and implementers. And program improvement. From the beginning, people with intellectual and developmental disabilities were part of the ALP program development. ALP&C developed and utilizes 2 curriculums. The leader curriculum, I'm sorry, Amy, would you mind advancing the slide? I'm sorry, there it is. All right, it has created a leader training curriculum as well as a facilitator training curriculum. More than 100 leaders have graduated from this program. Graduates of the program have also gone on to be a part of the facilitator certification, and 18 out of 18 facilitators, 11 of them are individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Next slide, please. Features of the ALP include all program activities are virtual. Program materials are downloadable and printable. The standard leader cohort is 8 consecutive weeks with alternating weeks of 4 hours and 1 hour sessions. Between session office hours are offered to support program participants or for program participants to support each other. The features for the facilitator certification involve the requirement of graduation from the standard leader cohort. It involves 6 consecutive weeks of classroom training, an assignment to a learning team which has 3 to 5 facilitators for each cohort. There's an assistant facilitator, and the first level of graduating from the standard cohort and the facilitator classroom training is the assistant facilitator who will shadow a certified facilitator for 1 full cohort. The next level is an associate facilitator who will participate in 2 cohorts. And the last level of facilitator certification is as a leader. The lead facilitator supports the learning team in working together and answers other facilitator questions. David Ingram, are you in the space? Forgive me, I'm suffering a bronchitis issue. I'm going to go to the next slide. Sorry.
So I'll just go through Melissa's slides for her. There is a program evaluation component, so pre and post. Surveys are there. an intensive evaluation. So in the spirit of scalability on replication, there is a high level of quality assurance associated with this. Next slide. So and remember, Amy mentioned that there is one size does not fit all. You don't have to select one scalability path over another. Growth for this particular project would call for an additional investment of council funds. The council desires to do something else with their funding, so they don't want to make additional investments. However, this is a viable project that might be rich for replication or a partnership. And so the council right now is in, they're packaging all of this together, trademarking it, making sure that they have the copyright so that they have some control about the project and how others use the name and the branding of it. But bottom line, others can run this program. So as you know, as the council, the North Carolina Council was looking to make people aware, and I think we heard in the first session from the lady from Commit to Connect, this innovation hub. This may be something that we need to explore with how councils make their replication opportunities available to each other. Part of what we wanted to do with the Impact Project was to make sure people knew of successful projects that they might be interested in contacting another council for, to be able to ask them more questions. But replication is rich for the Ability Leadership Program of North Carolina. And so making this effort known, of course, North Carolina in the last NACDD annual conference in 2024, they held a side meeting of other councils who might be interested in replicating this. And so that's one way, but you know, it is replication ready. So if you are looking for a ALP, you know, it's a self-advocate led, self-advocate facilitated leadership program, then this council has something that's ready. You don't have to build it. You need to be able to fund it and see that it is a successful model because success has occurred using this model. Amy, is there another slide? Or Melissa, are you back?
Just a little.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Of all of the messages I wanted to make sure to put forward, I've put it in the chat that Johnny Caleb's and the Kentucky Commonwealth Council on Developmental Disabilities attended both the July and the September session, and with the staff person who is the Director of Advocacy and Communications, Nicole Mayer. She's led the effort to bring ALP to Kentucky as early as this July.
Oh, cool. And Beth Stalvey is, you know, as a partnership guru, look at other organizations that do leadership training, Epilepsy Foundation, other disability and non-disability who might do some leadership training to, reach disability communities.
Great. Cheryl, I don't know if you wanted to give the information on project design or.
You know what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you all where it is so that you can see it. We do have a resource. If you go to our website, and Amy has posted all of the TAI materials, you will see a wonderful graphic on good project design. You know, outcomes and good timing on outcomes
is not by accident. It is by good planning. And so we have a new resource for you with these steps. I'm not going to go through them. I'm also going to ask you all to reference the 4 C's workshop, which takes you through all phases of project development. But really, the key takeaway here is to know what clear outcomes you're going for first. Then you design activities that actually speak to those outcomes and stop wasting time on other things. Execute and monitor, have your benchmarks and your milestones set, and you have a likely chance of getting those outcomes on time. So this is a resource. It will live on the itechhelp.org website.